So, this is probably, everyone probably knows this. These are threats and challenges for language teachers today. First of all is the short term, how do we identify AI? How do we stop using students? How do I identify AI? Well, if you think your students are using it, they are. And how do we stop them? We can't. So this is quite easy. I've done this. In the medium term, these are the more interesting questions. How should students use AI, which a lot of people are talking about at this conference? And also, what I'm going to try to do is what can we learn from AI? What lessons can we learn? And in the longer term, where's the beach?
Yeah, that's right.
There's either two scenarios. One of them is that there will be no work to do and we can just go to the beach and relax. The other one is that we are in mortal battle with AI and the only safe place will be the beach, where we're kind of trying to run away from the land-based AI and the sea-based AI. So this is what happened? So just think about machine translation in the last few years. The first time we came across machine translation, it was kind of these freak cases that were really funny because they were so bad. And then it became like a bit of an epidemic with students using machine translation, and we're thinking about how do we detect it. Then a pandemic, as we're trying to prevent our students from using machine translation. And now it's kind of endemic. This may be familiar with something else that's been going on. And in fact, as technology comes in, it's very similar to the way that viruses come in. And in fact, the Spanish flu is still with us. So when you get flu, some of that is the Spanish flu, which was a pandemic. So the same thing happens with technology. It's kind of here to stay. How do we live with it? Here are 5 predictions about AI. It will not go away. It will change the world. It will be better than us. It will not destroy us. And as we're language teachers, English will not be the global language. And I'll just try and address these possibly contentious ideas later. But first of all, since I'm talking about ER, do you know extensive reading? Yes? No? Oh. Do you know whether you know extensive reading? Yes? How do you know whether you know? Extensive reading is, in Japanese, sometimes it's called tadoku. That's just a literal translation. It's sometimes called graded reading. The idea that there are different grades or different levels of texts. I like the name rakudoku. Raku means easy and fun, and it's very important that it's easy and fun. It's sometimes called side reading, which I don't like. I don't think it's side reading. I believe the best thing that most students can do to get better at a language is reading. So the studying grammar is on the side. English lessons are on the side. But I think reading is the main thing. With a caveat that actually probably listening may be better than reading. So watching movies, talking to people may be the best thing. But if you have a class of 50 Japanese students, then that may not be ideal for practicing English. Good for practicing Japanese, but they tend to be quite good at Japanese already. So it's not side reading. And so in extensive reading, Day and Bamford, 1998, is often they came up with 10. The idea was that these are 10 features of extensive reading classes, but they're kind of a bit like Moses and the other guy. So these are like 10 commandments that have been handed down, that they must be easy, there must be variety, there must not be tests, and so on and so on. Then another, the Jesus of the extensive reading world, I think he's Jesus, is Sakai Sensei, who just came up with 3 rules. Forget the 10 commandments, just follow these 3 rules. And they are no dictionaries. If you don't know a word, ignore it. And if it's difficult, stop reading. Go and get something easier. And so these are fairly straightforward. The idea with dictionaries is dictionaries cause us frustration, anger, and pain. None of which are good things. So you should be trying to read something that's easy, that you can read without needing a dictionary. If there's a word you don't know, you should be able to just skip over it and keep reading. And if you get to a point where you really don't know what's going on, then just don't read that book. Go and find an easier book. And this is a very good guide to students to get them into the reading, to get them to do extensive reading. There are 7 reasons which I do not have time to go into. Yoda, this is Yoda, isn't he cute? He says something about this. There's a line where Luke is saying, "Oh, I'll try," and Yoda says, "No, try. Do or do not."
All right, I'll give it a try.
No, try not. Do or do not. There is no try.
And that's kind of what I want to tell. In my classes, I do not allow my students to try. Trying is forbidden. They just have to read, and that's what will get them there. Trying will not get them good at English. So extensive reading, just in a nutshell, is reading a lot of easy, enjoyable books. And notice, just to steer us back to AI, we're all worried about AI taking our jobs. And what should we do with our students? And reading enjoyable books, enjoying books is something that AI cannot do. So this, as an activity, this is AI proof. Getting our students to read and enjoy reading is something that I think is a very safe, long-term thing. We don't need to worry about AI taking this away. It will remain a good way for our students to learn. So how much is a lot? Kunihide Sakai came up with, I think this first was a joke. Is one of his students said, "How much should I read?" And he said, "I'll go and read 1,000,000 words." and I think 3 months later, the student came back and said, "I finished." And sure enough, did read 1,000,000 words. And if you just work out how 1,000,000 words, if you read 20 minutes a day, 140 words per minute, you can read 1,000,000 words in a year. So this seems like a very big number, but as we know, with very, very big numbers, if we take 3 smaller numbers and multiply them together, we get a very big number. And that's kind of but this is the order of reading that people need to do to get good at grade reading. And 140 words per minute is quite a slow speed, a very slow speed for a native speaker. If you're reading easy level books, 140 words per minute is a good speed. It should go up to kind of about 180. They need to read 98% coverage, as Charlie Brown was explaining earlier. To learn a word, you need to see it between 8 and 20 times in context. You can learn a word. I've learned this word. Learned it, but you haven't actually learned the word just by writing it 10 times. You need to actually get it connected with its meaning, which you can do very well with reading. And fluency is a very, very important part of extensive reading. Is fluency practice, and it's time being immersed in the language, which we kind of know is what's good. This is what you need for ER. You need time, permission to enjoy reading, and books at level. And there's never really a point where you have enough reading material. There's always need, and especially at the easy level, there's a real demand for books at the easy level. And that's really all you need. Everything else, things like tests. Teachers love tests. The problem with language teachers is they spend too much time teaching language. If only they would stop teaching language and just let the students get on with using the language, we would do a much better job. But don't tell our bosses. Sorry, back to my 5 AI predictions. And this is probably something you're familiar with. This is a human intelligence. This is machine intelligence. And this is Once Upon a Time. This is quite an old chart from about 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, this was now. I'm not sure. So the machines are getting more and more intelligent, and humans, we're limited by our biological brain power. Just as a caveat, I think good nutrition, good environment, good air quality, and good education will make us a little bit more intelligent, but it won't double our intelligence or double it every 18 months. That's not going to happen. But that is happening with machines. So there's some point which is called the singularity, at which the machines become more intelligent than we are. And I think this may have happened, but since I am a human, I am not capable of judging whether the machines are more intelligent than we are. But it seems very likely that it will happen. So there's my feeling is anything that we can measure and that we can define, the AI will be able to do it better than us. And things that we cannot measure and things that we cannot, this is a quote from Lord Kelvin, who was quite a good physicist, when you cannot measure it, when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. That's very stinging. He probably had an artist who he didn't like. So my feeling is if the things that we don't know, we don't understand, and it seems like, I think someone said before, intelligence is something that we can do that computers can't do. And that's a kind of circular argument. But I think anything that we can think of, anything we can do, I think the computers will be better. So AI will change the world. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So I think probably there are many people who are alive today who will not need to worry about this and who will not be affected by AI. I think there are very few people being born today who will not be affected by AI. So I think we're at a very interesting time in history. Just another thing, go back to Lord Kelvin again. He also said heavier than air flying machines are impossible. And he said this in 1895. I think 7 years later, the Wright brothers flew famously in their aeroplane. So just as another caveat, is predicting the future is very difficult, and knowing what's going to happen is all a guess. But my questions are some questions I have. Then, how did AI get so good at English? If we want to be good, if we want to get good at a foreign language, what should we do? And but do we really need to? Do we really need to get good at a foreign language? The answer, yeah. Yes. Computers and language. So there's been about 70 years of computers working with language, going back to World War II, when the development of computers even came out of code breaking. And there's about 7 years of ChatGPT. I think there's more development of AI and using large language models before that. This is a picture of Grace Hopper. It's the only one I could find where she was smiling. Who's actually very, very important, a programmer who made the first language-based computer program. So before that, it was all hex or ones and zeros, writing in machine language. And her plan was actually to make compilers so you could write in not just in English, but to write in other languages, and then the compiler would change what you'd written into computer language. However, she worked for the US Navy, who were really only interested in English. And so unfortunately, it's interesting to think what would have happened if she'd been allowed to go on and write in other languages other than English. Because I think still today there's a very strong bias towards English in the computing world, I think. And today there are somewhere between 700 and 9,000 computer languages. Just remember those numbers. There'll be a test later. So this is an AI. Can you spot? How do you know this is AI?
Fingers.
Very good. Yeah. My friend went to there's a ukiyo-e museum, and my friend went to the ukiyo-e museum and came and said, one of the pictures had been done by AI. The hands were terrible. But this fingers. This is actually the fingers are completely. AI has a problem. Has a problem counting. AI has this was my son's English workbook. If you've ever ridden a bicycle, that would be terrible. It makes no sense. It just makes. So English teachers may also have similar problems. Yeah, there are 3 things about English teachers. They like repeating themselves, and they're not very good with numbers.
Oh my God. That's terrible.
If you ask what number is the number between 1 and 9? What's the number in the middle of 1 and 9? 5, yeah. Apparently, if you ask, there are some languages that have no numbers, some pre-industrial languages. And if you ask speakers of languages with no numbers what the number between 1 and 9 is, they'll tell you 3. Like if you show them 1 thing and 9 things, they'll say that 3 is between 1 and 9, which makes a lot of sense, because if you times 1 by 3, you get 3, and if you times 3 by 3, you get 9. And in fact, if you look in, if you do a bit of corpus analysis, these are the numbers in English. These are their frequency and their rank. So number 1 is 38, very frequent number. And number 9 is number 1497. So the numbers in frequency, this is, I think, Bentham's law. I think it's the law called Bentham's law, which they use this to check whether you've fiddled your taxes. Because numbers appear in this frequency. So you're much less likely to have, if you just a piece of advice, if you're ever trying to fiddle your accounts, don't try and go, there's a 10 here, and there's 20 here, and there's 30 here, and there's 40 here, and there's 50 here. Don't do that. You need to make sure that you put most of the numbers start with a 1 or a 2 or a 3, and very few of them should start with a free tax advice. So, what was I talking about? Sorry, this is the wrong conference, sorry. So, the point, to the extent there is a point, numbers have got nothing to do with language. And this is also within the brain, the part of the brain that works with language cannot do maths either. So the large language models that have been created can't do maths. Where they can do maths, that's been added on as a separate functionality to the language models. Those are some things that none of these things are true. So the truth as well, the truth is not a function of language. So you can be very good at language and not speak the truth. Watch out if you have an election coming up. I will say no more. So humans also make mistakes. So we complain about ChatGPT, we got this wrong. But hey, humans make mistakes as well. And they also don't know why they made mistakes. They also pretended they were right. And when they realized they were wrong, they also pretend that they knew all along what was happening. So all the things we complain about ChatGPT, there's a lot of similarities between this is similar to AI, and so the way that I think recently the GPT and large language models have got very, very good at English, and if we look at why have they got so good, there are lots of parallels with extensive reading. So one of them is a large volume of exposure. AI is good at language because it's been given large amount of text. In context. All the text is within context, it's related to other things, other information. There's a focus on comprehension over rules. So when the earlier attempts at computers and language have all been based on rules. So we've kind of told the computer, this is how this language works. Here are the rules. And that didn't really work. And what has worked is when we don't focus on the rules, we say, here's the language, you need to work it out. And also not much feedback and not much correction. It's just given the models, it tries to work, it tries to produce something, and if it's right, that's good. If it's not right, it'll go back and try again. And this is, don't just believe me, this is what GPT-4 said the other day. It's the classic example of learning by doing, or in the case of language models, learning by observing and processing heaps of data. We pick up on linguistic nuances the same way a kid might learn to keep balance on a bike, by repeatedly seeing it in action, not by poring over the physics of two-wheeled locomotion. Yeah, I used to use a bicycle wheel for teaching grammar. I'd tell my students, I'd ask my students, how do you steer a bicycle? And most people say, oh, you just turn the handle. And no, that's not how you steer a bicycle. You steer a bicycle by leaning. And when you lean, because of the angular momentum in the first wheel, a tilt this way causes it to turn this way. So when you steer a bicycle, it's not because you turn the handles because the handles move because you've leant over. And most people don't know that. And that's very similar to grammar. And so this was my idea. This was my GPT stole. I don't know where you got it from. There are, I have to say, well, there are some differences. You can work out the differences yourself. So brain 1.0, our brain is about 2.5 petabytes has about 2.5 petabytes of memory. So our brain is still a lot bigger than most individual computers. Of course, individual computers have a faster processing speed. So they're not. Our brain is not a computer, and a computer is not a brain. But their power is becoming a similar order of magnitude. So another thing is, until recently, computers haven't been as powerful as brains, but they are now getting to be able to perform at similar levels. So basically, I think the lessons that we can learn from large language models and AI and GPT is that we don't consciously know all the rules, and that we need lots of data. And this is so. If we want to learn a language, this is what we should be trying to do. Forget the rules. Just read a lot. So I think this is something that we can learn from AI. So back to my predictions. Just the last one. 2 implications. Question and answer time. Question and answer time. I have a question. So I just very quickly. 2 implications. I think one of them is that nobody really needs to learn a language. Unfortunately, basically, or if you look at all the functions, until now we've been saying, oh, you need English because it's useful, because you need to do this, you need to write this paper, you need to translate this stuff. If you go on holiday somewhere, you want to order something in a shop. All of these things can be done by a machine, can be done by a phone. And so another implication which is that nobody needs to learn English. So until now, English has been the dominant language in the world. And I think that's kind of going to change. There's a huge investment as well to learning English. To get to this is the number of hours of instruction. I don't have the equivalent hours of extensive reading, but there's hours and hours, hundreds of hours, in order and to get this part's quite interesting. Going from 0 up to a few hundred words. This is a quite interesting part, and this part's quite interesting. But this part is not interesting at all because you can't really do anything. It's just lots of painful studying. So there's a huge investment of time that may just not be worth it. However, Google is looking at translating for the next 1,000 languages. This is data by language on the internet. There's a lot of these are mostly European languages that have very rich bilingual data based on, thanks to the EU, which legally require documents to be available in different languages and have equivalent meaning. So there's very, very good quality bilingual data from these countries. Interesting, I think DeepL came from using this data. So the reason why DeepL has been good at translating is because of that data. There's a huge number of languages that have much, much less data, but based on what the technology has learned translating between these languages, it doesn't need so much data from a monolingual corpus in order to create a translation model. So I think the potential for translating between 1,000 languages, the next global languages, I think the next global language is ones and zeros. And there are Gary was talking about the language codes, and there are ISO, there are 2-letter language codes, of which there are 183 have been allocated. There are 676 possible ones. There are around 7,000 languages in the world. So this is a bit of an oversight. Someone wasn't really planning ahead when they thought about it. And of the 7,000 languages, around 3,000 are endangered. And in a world with a growing population, this seems like a travesty. And if you are a language teacher, perhaps rather than worrying about English, we should be thinking about some of these other thousands of languages and what we can do to try and preserve these languages. And instead of forcing all of our students to study English, perhaps we should be encouraging all of them to study a foreign language. And the tools, this has obviously never gone wrong in the past. That's the Tower of Babel, if anyone's not an art aficionado. The future, just very quickly. One thing that, if I can tell everyone that Gary and I are working on, is an AI system that will generate texts for students to read at the right level and in the right area of interest. Also potentially, so it'll measure the students' reading level and will give them a text to read at their level, either beyond sort of, and also potentially this will be available in other languages. So English already has quite a good body of literature for students to learn from. Most other languages do not. That's the plan. That's all. Good luck. So just to conclude very quickly, AI is good because it's been doing ER. If we want to carry on as language teachers, I think we need to focus on humanity and culture, and not so much on English, or not so much on function. I think AI can help provide learning texts, and I think also there's a potential for AI to promote minor languages. Good luck. Thank you. Yes, Paul.
Mark,
Yes.
I detect a slight undertone of pessimism for our future. And so I just wanted you to help us think about this.
Yeah.
What should we do? I don't see. Is AI going to improve the temporary contract problem that we have in Japan? This is what I wanted to ask in our meetings, which I was citing my talk.
I don't know if they do have AI lawyers.
We're both sides will happen.
Yeah, but yeah. No, I don't. I mean, I think this is, it's really important for us to. We need to do a rapid kind of about face of where we've been heading in this direction, that English is useful. And I think, I don't want to get too political, but I think the neoliberal system has been pushing education. I heard about educational capitalism. They've basically been pushing us into this economic system that's designed and that's very good at producing products at increasingly lower costs, which I don't think is suitable for education. And I think and so in that model, I think there's been a traditional between literature and linguistics. English used to be literature, and people would learn how to understand the language by just reading. And then linguistics has kind of gradually taken over. Because linguistics is more sciencey, I think within the educational system, recently there's been more power to linguistics and less power to literature. And I think very rapidly we need to switch that around and get power to literature and power to culture. And linguistics is obviously important, but it's important to the same extent that being radiography is important. That we don't need everybody to study radiography for 10 years starting at elementary school. And I think that's where linguistics should be at that level. But literature is something, I think everybody should speak a language, everybody should read, everybody should appreciate art, music, and culture.
Well, there's also brain development, right? From little kids. And learning another language, playing music, things like that. Has been shown to develop, right?
Yep.
So,
Games.
yeah,
games.
So
Yeah.
sorry, I'm trying to gather my point here. My point is, I agree, but I'm not sure I completely disagree.
You're rebuttaling a little, right?
Yeah.
So I can rebuttal too. Like any
Yeah.
human connection between humans
Yes.
requires communication, requires a language, right?
Yep.
You can't use an app to communicate with someone forever.
Yeah, you can.
If it's an instant, you can't.
Of course.
But
You
I
can.
do use apps to.
Let's say you have a partner in life.
Yeah, you don't know any.
Starts in 10 minutes, guys.
You don't know any couples who don't speak the other
Yes.
partner's language very well.
Yeah, but they don't start off.
Yeah, usually.
My students always say they.
I don't usually finish like that.
interact.
Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not through.
Yeah, no, they always say that as.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. You're right. But it's a very long. It's a long way there.
reading,
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks all.
It goes back to literature. I just started right there.